Hi everyone, meteorologist Matt Gray. Another edition here of the Brainstorm on the 4 News Now YouTube page. Got something interesting for you. It's been a little while and the weather has been rather dull, but just saw something that I thought was super interesting, and I wanted to get a little into some of the science of why you are probably going to see this report in some form or fashion on whatever you may be reading. If you're like me and you're interested in weather, this stuff comes across your social feeds all the time. So this is about wildfires, and it's about how wildfires affect more than just the areas and the communities around them. We already know a little bit about this because there's plenty of wildfires far away from us that end up giving us very smoky conditions throughout the summer. We're talking beyond that. We're talking about really the entirety of the United States, and some impacts that you may not have thought of before. I certainly didn't. And so this study here, done by the Pacific Northwest and National Laboratory over in Richland, Washington, is very interesting. A study by the Department of Energy. So we know a lot about local wildfire effects, right? We've got a release of heat, air quality concerns. If fires are burning hot enough, they create their own kind of micro weather around them, so we can see strong winds pulling into the fire, which sometimes creates more situations and can have fires create their own fires by blowing embers out ahead of the flames and all this other stuff. And then you have, of course, the pyrocumulonimbus cloud, which is, because it gets so hot right over the top of the fire, all of the water vapor condenses very quickly, and now you have a thunderstorm sitting on top of this wildfire. It would be nice if it could put it out, but you really have to have a hot fire for that to happen. So the rain effect gets counteracted. So this is a study, once again, by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Richland. And what they did was they were looking at correlations between large fires in the west and severe thunderstorms out in the plain states. So eastern Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, eastern Colorado. Those types of kind of northern and central plain states where the thunderstorms, when they go, and they get some crazy weather with the severe thunderstorms developing in the lee of the Rocky Mountains. And so what they did was they saw enough of a correlation, particularly with some big wildfire events and some severe storms in the Colorado area in 2018, that they decided to build a computer model, a simulation, because they wanted to test to see if there was any actual relationship between the two. And indeed there is. This is what they found. This is a wonderful graphic that they had illustrated with this scientific paper. These papers can often be very dull to read, which is why I read them so you don't have to. But this was super awesome, and so I'm going to have it linked below in the description of this video. Or if you're clicking on this from the Brainstorm newsletter, there's also a link to that on the newsletter page, because it is it's a fun little read, or at the very least you can get another look at this graphic. So fires in the west, not only are they producing lots of heat, but they're also producing lots of smoke. Now, smoke has what we call aerosol particles. It's little tiny bits, of that smoke. It's actually made out of something. And those westerly winds transport it out across the mountains and into the north and central plains, where we get these really big thunderstorms. Well, it's not just the smoke, but it's also the heat that plays a role here, because all that heat being released by those fires, it's actually strengthening high pressure over the west, which is something we see a lot in the summertime. So it's a positive feedback loop. Essentially, you have a weather event that causes something to happen, and that event, those fires, is strengthening said weather event that caused that to happen, or helped that to happen in the first place. So that's interesting enough. It's also because you're seeing stronger high pressure. We're also seeing stronger low pressure over the central plains as a response to that, and stronger winds coming across from the southwest and into the northern and central plains. And this was all in these computer simulations. Now, it may be a little strange to think about, well, how does smoke lead to more severe thunderstorms? Because, yeah, when you have stronger winds, you have stronger wind shear. That's a pretty key ingredient when we're talking about big, bad, nasty thunderstorms. The smoke part of it may be something that is not as intuitive. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's put the magnifying glass in a cloud. What do we see? We see our tiny little cloud droplets, right? Well, in order for them to condense when they get high up in the atmosphere and chilly enough, they need something to stick to. It's what we call cloud condensation nuclei. You know what's really good for doing that? Smoke particles. Smoke and dust down the line can often provide those little seeds for cloud droplets to form, which eventually become bigger clouds and then big thunderstorms. So you've got all of these kind of particles in this atmosphere. And so if you have a weather pattern that's conducive to storm development, well, guess what? You've kind of juiced up the atmosphere a little bit. And so here's what these storm simulations ended up showing the scientists that wrote this paper. When they simulated in a computerized environment, they found that when you had large wildfires in the west, simulated the thunderstorms that they would simulate over the Central Plains. 38% more heavy rain. Flash flooding is a huge issue with these storms. And 34% more severe hail. 2 inches or greater. So we're talking about like baseball, softball, and larger hail. And there is no place on Earth, or well, almost no place on Earth, that you get that more often than in those high plain states. Colorado, for example, lots of huge cases of hail, or lots of cases of huge hail in the state of Colorado, right in the lee of the Rocky Mountains. Things get crazy over there, and potentially big wildfire seasons, when all the other weather conditions are set up right for severe weather, may be enhancing the severity of those storms. So that is a really extraordinary piece of work done here, and something that is likely going to have lots of other scientists investigating, trying to repeat these things, trying to confirm that, trying to look at case studies from weather events and fire events in the past, see if there's more correlation. So this is just the beginning of research. This is not the end. This is just the very, very beginning. And it is so interesting how widespread the wildfires here in the West, in the Northwest, can affect basically the entirety of the rest of this country. Now, there's some other nationwide impacts that we have to talk about. Air quality, that's an issue. There have been links to air quality and smog with smoke and regular pollution on stagnant days as that smoke comes across the country, even over to the eastern seaboard in places like New York, where the air quality is lowered because of that. So wildfire smoke is a nationwide issue. Also, when it's not a conducive day for thunderstorms, you end up with slightly lower temperatures because of the smoke, sunlight bouncing off the smoke and then getting reflected, at least a little bit of it, back up out of our atmosphere. So you have multiple ways that these wildfires are affecting weather patterns. You've got potential enhancement of thunderstorms. You've got strengthening high pressure in the west. You've got temperature lowering in the Central Plains as well. I mean, there's all sorts of little things where it's just a tiny little piece that's added on to the overall weather picture. And eventually, a bunch of little things can add up to big changes. What we talk about when we talk about climate change, it's just little things that happen, but they happen often enough, and there's enough of them, enough of these little changes, that all of a sudden our weather patterns become much different than they were many decades ago. So I hope you enjoyed that. We are going to continue to put interesting explanations of the science behind the weather here on the 4 News Now YouTube page and in our Brainstorm newsletter. If you've got some questions, maybe there's some weather question that's been bugging you, reach out. MacRayKXLY on Twitter, MacRayKXLY on our Facebook page. Of course, you can watch any of our videos from the past on the 4 News Now YouTube page as well if you've been watching this from our newsletter. And we also have a button on the Brainstorm newsletter that will send an email over to me. And been looking for some more video ideas and some things that maybe you might be interested in hearing explained about weather and the science of our planet. So I look forward to any feedback and responses from that. In the meantime, I really hope that you enjoyed this. Go ahead, hit like, hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and we'll see you again soon for another edition of the Brainstorm.